Another big detail to keep in mind around the archer play, why I think you guys made archers even better of an idea for Order of the Dragon, is the fact that mangonels aren't the counter that they normally are because it takes additional shots because of the extra health. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We have to start off in the darkest of ages, but it's kind of funny we start in Dark Age when this feels like maybe the new golden age of Age of Empires 4. It's time for more Sultans Ascend content. We hop into the fourth match for our second Jeanne d'Arc Order of the Dragon matchup. Only this time, Jeanne's going to be there in the hands of DeMu.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of build order differences he's going to bring to the table. We saw Mista. He won the game in the end, but I think that was off of night raids, not really anything because Jeanne related, right? Like he kind of was a little behind with Jeanne d'Arc for a bit. I would say, at least from my understanding. So we'll see how it goes this time around because there was that one big fight, right, where he didn't get any experience. So we'll see if DeMu is able to keep up with the tempo and the timings. And we'll see if Mist is able to deal with the raids and keep his gilded villagers alive because they are quite hard to keep alive sometimes, especially if there's a really effective raid. It can put you really far behind on Order of the Dragon.
Yeah, the nice thing is actually I think the damage values, considering the health they gave, the extra 15 health across the Order of the Dragon villages, it clearly was considering a lot of these situations where normally you kind of get screwed over, right? Because one thing I was thinking here is, for example, the Order of the Dragon would typically have an issue against knights if they had 50 health, right? Because knights can ride in and just two-tap you if they lance. Now they require a third strike to take out one of those villages.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot more low HP villagers if you're taking a lot of pressure as Order of the Dragon, like you're mentioning. But it's also a lot more stressful sometimes to keep them all alive. Oh, man.
Yes. Well, actually, one thing that I'm thinking of here is, you mentioned how Jean is like, he kind of played a typical French, but one thing I want to be conscious of is like actually some things do change when you play up against the Jean, in that you have to change the way you'd approach the game entirely, right? Like just the fact you don't want to give over XP and whatnot changes how you approach everything.
Exactly. Like if you're playing against Jeanne d'Arc, I think we've seen a lot of games, especially if you've been watching games on the creator preview to this point, or even if this is your first like look into it, is this weekend. There's been a lot of games so far where Jeanne has been really, really ahead, right? But I think that's because people kind of have to get used to what the counterplay is for Jeanne and how to handle Jeanne being on the field, right? Because it's not the same, right? You do have to react to Jeanne being on the opponent's team, right? You have to understand what the strategic implications are and try to come with a solution. So we'll see as the meta develops in both the preview and once it releases on the 14th, how players can progress with this and get further and further along with the strategy development. I'm so excited for how strats are going to develop. This is going to be so exciting. And also on top of that, I was wondering, well, we're in this Dark Age here. We've already talked about this matchup a bit. We've seen a little bit. If you guys have any questions in the chat, now might be a good time. We're going to see Minework and School of Cav. The builds are pretty similar. I think we've talked a lot about these civs and given you guys a rundown. So if you guys have any questions for the next like 2 or 3 minutes while we're in this Dark Age, feel free to shoot some questions in the chat and I'll try and read and catch up and can answer any like kind of technical questions like what does this do, what is that, like can you explain this concept or that concept, because there's a lot to go over. We've been pretty fast. We've been going over things very quickly. Yeah. So if you have any questions right now, feel free. I think this is a good time.
Yeah, they literally give us no breathing room. Like this is the one time you get to have your questions answered, because I guarantee there's gonna be knights in the field, there's gonna be murder to be had on this particular dance floor, and usually Jean is the one facilitating it. But we are getting mind work again. Someone I mentioned is like, I think we are going to be seeing a lot more mind work with Order of the Dragon compared to normal HRE. I think some of those unique techs as well are kind of too fancy to pass up. I think the main one for me is the Zonhao, the one that gives a bleed effect to your Lanknecht.
So just a couple questions here. What are your favorite civs so far? All of them. I really can't show bias here. I like all of them equally. Although there's a special place in my heart for, I think, just the way Japanese play. Not necessarily the civ, but like the play style feels, I quite like it. What is the late game powerhouse unit for the Order of the Dragon? Well, that really depends on how you view it. If you're in a situation where you have a really good economy with gold income, so you need Ragnits and maybe trade, I think any of their really intensive gold units can do quite well. Landsknecht Man-at-Arm is extremely difficult to deal with. They're very durable, and usually Landsknecht have this weakness where they can be sniped or taken down easily by AoE damage, but these Landsknecht are very, very potent. Also, their knights can be quite good. With all of their upgrades, they have a tech that lets them take less damage well charging, and that lasts a little bit after. So they get they can like charge into battle and tank a lot of hand cannon hits or a lot of like spearman damage, for example. Is Byzantine OPO too good?
Not the way it's being played.
Depends on your perspective. I think they're quite strong in the right situations.
I think, like what we said last game, where I stand, I think the Grand Winery is still a bait. I think once we start seeing people find ways of utilizing the Hippodrome, Byzantines, at least that landmark's probably going to have to be nerfed. I'd rather wait until we have a Byzantine game to fully break it down on why it's so ridiculously strong. But let's just say, usually, like based on that game you just saw between Mr. and DeMu, you'd think the Byzantines always have to turtle. That's not always the case, unless they are a dragon turtle, in which case, yes. They can be ferocious as well. But right now, the person trying to be ferocious out on the map is going to be DeMu. Notice he's moving out for the ball. And wait, where is Jeanne? Oh, okay, she's on her way. I thought if it was jumping the gun here, he's even going to keep the wolf alive. This is important because that's going to be 12 XP. Thank you very much. And I wonder if he's going to use a divine arrow here to snipe the ball quicker. Might be worth it. It's basically almost a third of the HP. I guess he doesn't want to use it. They are pretty expensive, right? Like, they take 60 seconds to recharge, so he'll just take it out normally. Interesting wall in here, but for good reason, considering that Mr. has already added in those horsemen, those Giga Horsemen that you were talking about a bit earlier.
Yeah, the horseman build from Mr. I'm really glad we're seeing some of these units on, because I think they're super, super potent. They're really strong. They're really good. They move at the horseman speed, but they have really stats. So they're actually, in my opinion, I think they're on par, or if not better than Spahi at rating. So if you think Spahi are good at rating, this unit can, because they're like space efficient at taking down vills, right? Like usually horsemen have like bumping and like you need a big surround. Just two of these are kind of like two knights, right? But they're running around even faster, right? So they're less vulnerable to spearmen. They can get in, get out. It's a lot. It's a lot to handle as the opponent. So I'm excited to see how Mr. handles this, although looks like a nice wall from DeMu going to keep the enemies at bay.
And if anyone's like, haha, Lamal, terrible civ, gets countered by a wall, no, calm down, folks. If you hover on the horseman, you'll see they do have some compensation for their torch damage, so don't ever think that you can just be safe behind your little baby walls. They will break the crap out of everything fast. So I think there's even some unique text, if I recall correctly, around torch damage, right? Or am I thinking
Dragonfire?
Yes, I think so. Right.
That is for the spearmen. So
Got it.
the Order of the Dragon units do have increased torch damage because you have less units of torch. They're too pop.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, they are individual. Oh, but Jeanne is an archer, and Jeanne does take bonus damage, so the horseman going to directly counter her situation. You can see they're big, they're scary even to knights, right? Like these are two horsemen each on screen, so this knight's gonna get run down, and down he goes.
You can't get away. Like, this is so painful right now for DeMu, and it's gonna sound cringeworthy to have to do this, but if you're not building spearmen against this now as Jeanne, this game could be over very fast.
Yeah, exactly. This is something that, like, people, I've been seeing, I've been kind of monitoring comments of people on Reddit, on Discord, and the Twitch chats, and there's this narrative that Order of the Dragon seems a little weak. And I just want to clarify that there's a lot to explore with these civs, and these early games are not going to be very clear indicators of how the balance actually looks in like a couple weeks once everyone's on it. You know, thousands, millions are going to get played, right? So we'll see. We'll see. I think these horsemen really are really good.
They are.
I'm excited to see them being showcased here by Mista here. One of the more creative players coming in clutch.
Now, you say that, but I just want to highlight something at this point. I mean, Mista, if there's any player that loves his horseman, it's this guy, right? Like, think about the builds he's come up with in the past. Even when he was playing Japanese earlier, immediately tried to spam out a horseman. Part of me is like I wonder if DeMu, as he sees this, like, it's kind of a smile on his face, like, of course, Mr. built horseman. Of course he'd go for this build. And it's kind of infuriating right now for DeMu because you can see he still hasn't added in the racks at all, right? He's still just sticking on cavalry and archers. The running risk you have here is you're falling behind on blacksmith techs, because that's another element to this play for the Order of the Dragon is Mr. is getting those tech ups 40% faster and 40% cheaper via the mine work.
Exactly. It's amazing tempo for the Civ as well. The Aachen Chapel for Order of the Dragon, I saw someone asking about it. It still exists. You don't put a prelate in it. Instead, it just has like an aura around it where your villagers are 10% better. Now keep in mind that's on top of the villagers already kind of coming in a way, like if you want to think about it like this, pre-inspired. And how is my mic coming? Is it working here, KP?
You're good now. I think you're good for now.
Okay.
Apologies that, folks. It's
Yeah,
you know what
sorry
it
guys.
is. It's because Winston's giving away all the content. But the funny part is, if he waffles for every single game on all the new stuff, there'd still be more things to talk about. There's just so
I
much in this
I
expansion.
could talk about this DLC to you guys for like 20 hours and I would not run out of topics. There is so much there is so much going on. It's awesome.
It is beautiful to also see this Burgrave not being a meme. There's multiple reasons, by the way. We already covered in the previous game why you might go for the Burgrave with the discount, right? The 30% faster production speed and also 30% discount on Order of the Dragon that pays more for their units inherently. But another interesting element to think about, you kind of, in a way, this change nerfed Regnets to make this a more 50-50 choice. And what I mean by that is, it used to be when you play HRE, you already had one prelate bare minimum before you hit Castle Age. You might have two or three. So you're ready to get relics. With this Civ, you can't just hit that race out timing because you don't get prelates until Castle Age, right? So you can't actually start producing them until you finish your tech up.
Yeah, no, I would. It kind of nerfs it a bit, yeah, for sure. Like, there's definitely that element. You can't pre-collect the relics, but you also kind of want to play for map control with Order of the Dragon, anyways. I think, at least in my opinion, I think the Civ actually plays quite differently to base HRE in a lot of ways. I really like doing 2TC builds with them because I find that it gives you more scaling and you can kind of play more into the feudal age where some of your units have a lot of efficiency, right? Obviously, the Burgrave though going to be a different way to play it here, and we can see Mista going for the Burgrave. Royal Institute coming in though for DeMu, which is more normal. It's going to be pretty standard, except it has access to a couple different unique techs for Jeanne than compared to normal French, but most of them are the same.
Yes, eyebrows, eyebrows. Would you like to upgrade your support units? Eyebrows, eyebrows. Yes, I would, but I'd also have to not be level 2 Jeanne. So those unique techs won't have value for a little bit of time. I know some people asking about whether Jeanne still gets the influence around the keeps. It's a bit different with her, right? Because she has the Consecrate ability, but you are able in Castle Age to upgrade the Consecrate to not just give you discounts on food.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually, is it that tech there under C? If you
Yeah.
hover on that core, it'll be, there you go, Ordnance Company.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes that buff really, really strong. Can we actually check Demu's base? We've been explaining the civs, but not really. I know this is gonna sound silly, but I feel like I haven't been casting this game very much. We have so both stables. So once again, the players going for both stables is actually very similar to what Mista did. One of the cool things you can do with Consecrate is actually put it on the town center itself, and I think that's one of the most consistent ways to do it. I think you do get slightly more food per minute if you're making knights or horsemen.
Yes.
But I think it's more consistent because you're basically guaranteed to always be training vills from the TC, whereas you're not necessarily guaranteed to be training vills or training knights the entire game, right?
Yeah, that's the catch, right? If you ever need to transition off, then this building kind of feels like dead weight. I think one key choice around whether stables versus TCs is more optimal is going to be if you went for the Chamber of Commerce or the School of Cavalry. Because if you go for the School of Cavalry, you produce knights quicker, which means you're essentially getting more discounts per minute in the matchup versus whether TC is better. But if you're talking about without School of Cavalry, it takes you 35 seconds to get that 25% discount compared to 20 seconds for every smaller discount on these villages. So it's kind of something important to keep in mind. I say that as if we actually see many Chamber of Commerces. One day it will be an important thing to keep in mind, Winston.
Yes, I think there's some strats with Chamber of Commerce with Jeanne, but they're a bit weird. It's better in team games, I think, when you don't need to be the only player massing units in feudal age to get experience on Jeanne. When you can kind of rely on your teammates, you can go like too stable after Chamber. It can be quite good. You still have the technology discount that normal French has, right? So you can still kind of tempo into those techs in the early game. And that can help supplant the fact that you don't have the faster producing TCs, right?
Yes. And by the way, something to keep in mind here is, it kind of seems like Jeanne's worthless and what was the point? You've already kind of lost the game. But there is some versatility here. Like, for one, DeMu could have tried to sneak Sacred Sites because he actually has Age 3 now, which would have given him XP. Another thing is things like when he was castle aging up here, if he'd been at home with Jeanne and kept her nearby, in level 1, she builds 33% faster. After that, she projects an aura around her that makes all villagers nearby build 33% faster. So something to keep in mind for those that just can't get out of their base. But right now, it looks like Mista's trying to get into DeMu's. A charge forward coming out here. A decent comp. I think it's actually got one Langsnecht in there. It's a little bit hard to see and also very difficult to snipe with that increased health. Where is he?
DeMu's been doing some interesting stuff here, trying to navigate. I don't know what he's looking for before he takes this fight. He's just kind of running it around, letting the TC deal damage. Finally finds a little choke point that he's happy dealing some damage in. Does get some experience here. You can see a lot of experience when some of these horsemen go down. 24 because the unit is 240 resources. But my gosh, these Order of the Dragon units are tanky, and there are a lot of them. But this choke point isn't ideal.
It's Jeanne d'Arc level 3. Okay, this is really big. He just spawned in the companions. Now he has extra weight to his defense here. And he's more or less only up against men-at-arms. Men-at-arms that don't get things like the maces and the two-handed, right? So because they have higher base stats, they don't get those extra juicy plump elements, the HRE, which means these heavily armored units are going to be able to hold. And just like that, DeMu now finds himself with the pop advantage militarily. The first time in what feels like quite some time.
That was a really impressive fight from DeMu. I really admire his patience there, because I do not have that kind of patience. I would not be letting my units take chip damage running around like that, but he really waited for the perfect time, and he got an engagement that was really good. And in the end, a lot of experience went his way here. So Jeanne finally to tier 3 quite late, probably later than he wanted. You can imagine, right? He finally got that experience that he needed, and now we have access to the riders. So let's talk about this level up just a little bit. We talked about it in the previous set, or the previous game where we had Order of the Dragon versus Jeanne d'Arc. You can pick between the champions or the riders. The riders here have that bonus versus the crossbowmen. They're also very potent raiders with very high ranged armor, right? So they can do quite a lot. Look at that, 6 and 8 ranged armor is a lot.
And also he got Raw Institute, right? So look at the biology difference it's making. Usually this is a 190 HP unit, 215. Remind me, Winston, how much did he pay for 3 of those?
He didn't pay anything.
What? He got the 5-finger discount? Oh, damn.
Yeah, on every 4 minutes, Jeanne can call in 3 units, right? So that's they're valued around 200 resources each, and you can train more of these units from the keeps for Jeanne d'Arc.
Yeah, I'm waiting for someone to do that. So far, I've cast a few Jeanne d'Arcs. No one's really got to the keep scaling, but yes, you have the ability to push them out the keeps. They're a little bit more pricey because they're better stats, but if you have Consecrate on the keeps, it becomes an efficient opportunity there. And speaking of efficient things to target down, a really big part of why DeMu was able to get to that level 3 so quickly, you mentioned the higher values. This guy especially, this guy who's suffering from gigantism, this guy that looks like he could actually take out Dwayne Rock Johnson, he has quite a lot of health, but also costs quite a lot of resources. I think it's 480 resources, if I'm not mistaken, for a 400 HP heavy knight.
Yeah, these gilded knights are really, really strong. And under it, you can see the warhorse tech. He's not going to be able to get that until Imperial, but yeah, these gilded knights, they certainly pack punch, and it's a strong unit. Talk about some population efficiency. They are 2 pop, but I think they're worth it. They have so much value, and they are so hard to take down. This is a really good time for the units to try and use the prelates to heal. You're in Castle Age. Trying to get a couple prelates out, I think, is very important to try and use some healing to keep these units alive. It's so much value.
It's important that you don't get caught out, because if they do go down, the price lost is high. And he's up against quite a lot of artillery at this point. But Jeanne! Oh, he gets the Divine Restoration. Okay, and now he's running into the crossbow line, so he will just about keep her alive, and that was very important now, because as long as he's not in combat, Jeanne will heal for 1.5 health per second. Actually, I think it's 2, right, at this stage in the game. It's 1 health a second when you're a villager, 1.5 when you're level 2, 2 at level 3, and then 2.5 at level 4.
Yeah, an important thing to note is that when you pick melee or ranged, Jeanne is ranged unit here. So she does have ranged damage reduction as a passive element. So something like the Javelin will deal a little bit less than you'd expect. But melee counters to ranged units do exceptionally well. So Horsemen, if they get the surround, the Horsemen are just going to kill Jeanne in this situation. So it's a very risky situation for DeMu. He has to be very careful that making sure she doesn't get surrounded. And that is 7 Gilded Landsknecht. And I believe we see Zornhau on the field, right?
Yeah, I think so. They've got the longer poles, right? That's how you can tell. So if you
Mhm.
check the mine work, there you go. Zonhao for them, which means they now have. Does it increase the range? I don't think so. It's just the bleed effect that they add in, right?
It adds a bleed effect to the Gilded Landsknecht. So when they attack, that whole sweeping arc, everyone gets tagged by a bleed. I think it's 1 damage every second for 20 seconds, I believe is the
Was
numbers.
it?
I actually forget the
I
exact
think
stats
it's
on that.
like I don't want to
2?
like just cut you off. It's 2
2.
every 1 second
Yeah.
for 10 seconds. And woo, get out of here! What are you doing in this area? Horseman trying to ride to the backside. DeMu creating a little bit of a concave, but that actually might serve a better purpose for Mista as now he catches up with the Landsnecht. But you got to keep Jeanne alive here. I think he's still at the Divine Restoration on cooldown. It's coming off in 20 seconds. He can summon more companions, which might be a good way of splitting this fight a bit. But that bleed is starting to add up. These knights, they're melting. Like a hot knife is slicing through butter. But the line is feeling the Mista. And now it's mainly just the glass cannons. With a good bit of kiting, DeMu can clean up the rest of the forces.
But the Night Mass went down a very critical. Oh well, really important.
Not that important.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a big. That was a big expensive loss there, and feeding a lot more experience to Jeanne. But an interesting thing there is that that bleed does get countered by healing. So if he had had it off cooldown, he could have instantly cleansed all the units from the bleed. Now, they would have then gotten reapplied, and no, it does not stack. So like only one instance of bleed can be on you at once, but getting attacked again does refresh the timer. So the most recent hit will be 20 seconds from there.